When Melissa ran through Terminal C screaming for help, 40 people pulled out their phones to record her mother dying, but only one man dropped everything and ran toward the crisis instead of away from it. Smith Ramos, a billionaire known as the Clockwork King for never missing a beat, had just missed his first flight in 15 years, and that 12-minute delay put him face-to-face with a terrified child whose world was ending in real time. What he discovered next would cost him $40 million, threaten everything he'd built, and prove that sometimes the universe breaks your plans to fix your soul. Welcome back to my beautiful family at Mr. Crown Stories. Before we begin, I want you to hear something true. You are stronger than your struggles, braver than your battles, and more valuable than you've been told. I create these stories for hearts like yours, hearts that have known pain but refuse to break, hearts that still believe in tomorrow even after surviving yesterday. If this message finds you at the right time, click subscribe, comment I believe, and tell me where you're watching from, because every story I share is a reminder that hope is real, kindness exists, and your breakthrough is coming. Let's walk this journey together. Now, let us begin. Smith dropped his briefcase without thinking. The expensive Italian leather hit the polished terminal floor with a hollow thud as he knelt down instantly, bringing himself to the child's eye level. Behind her, near gate 22, he could see a woman slumped motionless against an airport bench, her body twisted at an unnatural angle. People were gathering, some filming with phones raised high, others frozen in place, staring but not helping. "Where's your mom, sweetheart?" Smith asked, though his eyes had already found her. She fell asleep, but she won't wake up." The little girl sobbed, grabbing his blue suit jacket with both tiny fists. Her voice cracked on every word. "I shook her and shook her, but she won't open her eyes. Please, mister, please help her. Please." Smith looked into the child's face and saw terror so raw it punched the air from his lungs. Pure, unfiltered fear. The kind that reaches inside your chest and rearranges everything you thought mattered. "Show me," he said firmly, taking her trembling hand in his. "Take me to your mom right now." They ran together across the terminal. Smith's polished shoes slapped against the white tile as they weaved between rolling suitcases, families pulling luggage, and travelers sipping coffee like the world wasn't ending 10 feet away. The little girl pulled him forward with shocking strength, desperation giving her speed. When they reached gate 22, Smith's stomach dropped. The woman was slumped sideways on the bench, her head tilted back at an angle that looked wrong. One arm hung limp at her side. Her chest barely moved, shallow breaths, slow and fading. Her face was pale, peaceful in the worst possible way. She looked like she was sleeping. But something was very wrong. "Mommy! Mommy, wake up!" The little girl dropped to her knees beside her mother, shaking her shoulder desperately. "I brought help, Mommy, please wake up." Smith immediately pressed 2 fingers to the woman's neck, searching for a pulse. It was there, but weak, irregular, fading fast. He scanned the crowd forming around them. At least 40 people stood watching in a loose circle. Some held up phones. Some whispered to each other. Not one of them moved to help. "Someone call 911 right now," Smith commanded, his voice cutting through the murmurs like steel. When no one moved fast enough, he yanked out his own phone and dialed, keeping his other hand on the woman's wrist to monitor her pulse. "I need an ambulance at the airport, Terminal C, Gate 22. Woman, mid-30s, unconscious, weak pulse, shallow breathing." His voice was calm, controlled, but his heart was hammering. The operator's voice asked questions. Smith answered each one precisely while keeping his fingers pressed to the woman's pulse point. The little girl clung to his arm, her entire body shaking with sobs. "Is she gonna die?" the child whispered, her voice so small it nearly broke him. "Is my mommy gonna die?" "No, sweetheart. No, she's not," Smith said with a certainty he didn't feel. "Help is coming. Okay? What's your name?" "Melissa," she whispered, wiping her eyes with the back of her hand. Her red dress had a small juice stain near the collar. Her shoes lit up when she moved. She was so small, too small to be dealing with this kind of nightmare. "That's a beautiful name. I'm Smith. Melissa, I need you to be very brave right now. Can you do that for your mom?" Melissa nodded, biting her lips so hard it turned white. Does your mom take any medicine? Does she have any medical problems? Smith asked gently. She gets really tired, Melissa said, her voice trembling. She works all the time. 3 jobs. She said she just needed to rest. We were just waiting for our flight. Smith felt something twist deep in his chest. 3 jobs. A single mother by the look of things, working herself into the ground to keep her daughter fed and safe. And now she was unconscious on an airport floor while strangers filmed her worst moment. Put those phones away, Smith said coldly, his voice sharp enough to cut. Several people lowered their devices immediately. Give her some dignity. Airport security arrived first, pushing through the crowd with a medical kit. A young officer knelt beside Doris and began checking vitals while an older officer started moving people back. Ambulance is 4 minutes out, the young officer said. What happened? I don't know, I just got here. Her daughter said she collapsed. Smith kept his hand on Melissa's shoulder. The child was still shaking violently. The paramedics arrived like a storm, efficient, professional, immediate. They worked quickly, asking rapid-fire questions, checking responses, hooking up monitors. Smith watched the numbers flashing on the portable screen. Blood pressure dangerously low. Heart rate erratic. We're taking her to Mercy General, one paramedic announced, lifting the stretcher with practiced speed. Closest trauma center. Wait, I have to go with her. That's my mom. Melissa tried to follow, but a security officer gently held her back. Honey, you can't ride in the ambulance. Is there someone we can call? A family member? No. There's nobody. Just me and Mommy. Melissa's voice rose to a desperate pitch. She whipped around to Smith, her eyes wide with panic. Please don't leave me. Please. Have you ever seen a child so terrified their whole world was falling apart in real time? Smith didn't hesitate. I'll bring her, he said, his voice leaving no room for negotiation. I'll follow the ambulance and bring her daughter. The paramedics looked at him skeptically. Are you family? No. But look at her. Smith gestured to Melissa, who was now clinging to his jacket like it was the only solid thing left in the universe. She has no one else right now. I'm not leaving this child alone in an airport. One of the paramedics nodded slowly. Mercy General. Emergency entrance. They'll need to verify some things, but thank you. They wheeled the stretcher away fast, Doris's body a fragile shape beneath white sheets. Melissa watched her mother disappear around the corner, fresh tears streaming down her face. Smith knelt down one more time, looking Melissa directly in the eyes. Listen to me very carefully, he said. We're going to the hospital right now. We're going to make sure your mom gets the best doctors, the best care, everything she needs. But I need you to trust me. Can you do that? Melissa stared at him for a long, weighing moment, calculating odds no 6-year-old should ever have to consider. Finally, she nodded and slipped her small hand into his. Okay, she whispered. Smith stood, still holding her hand, and grabbed his briefcase with the other. His missed flight to Tokyo seemed like a distant memory now, completely irrelevant. Nothing mattered except getting this little girl to her mother. As they walked quickly toward the exit, Melissa looked up at him. Why are you helping us? She asked quietly. You don't even know us. Smith looked down at her, this tiny girl in a red dress who had just run straight into his life and shattered everything he thought he knew about himself. Because you asked me to, he said simply. And because it's the right thing to do. Melissa considered this, then leaned against his arm as they walked. My mommy always says there are good people in the world, she whispered. She says when things get scary, look for the helpers. Are you a helper? Smith felt something crack open in his chest, something that had been locked away for years. I'm going to try to be, he said. And in that moment, as they stepped through the automatic doors into the sunlight, Smith Ramos, the billionaire who never missed a beat, never missed a meeting, and had never missed a flight until today, realized something profound. Maybe he hadn't missed his flight at all. Maybe he had been exactly where he was supposed to be. The drive to Mercy General took 11 minutes that felt like 11 hours. Smith's driver, Marcus, though Smith had embarrassingly forgotten his name until now, navigated through midday traffic with practiced precision. The black sedan weaved between cars, never reckless but urgently fast. Smith had made 3 phone calls in the first 5 minutes, his voice low and clipped. The first was to his assistant: cancel everything for the next 48 hours. I don't care what it is. Reschedule, postpone, delegate, I don't care. Handle it. The second was to his lawyer: I need information on temporary guardianship procedures. Emergency situations. Medical authorization for a minor. Send me everything in the next 10 minutes. The third call was the one that mattered most. Robert? It's Smith Ramos. Yes, I know you're in surgery rotation this month. Listen, there's a woman being brought into Mercy General right now. Doris Lawson. Collapsed at the airport, critical condition. I need your best people on her case. No, I'm not family. But I'm making myself responsible. Do whatever it takes. Bill everything to my personal account. Robert Patterson was the chief of emergency medicine at Mercy General and sat on the board of a children's hospital Smith funded heavily. The man owed him nothing, but Smith's donations had built an entire pediatric wing. That kind of generosity bought access, and right now, access meant survival. Melissa sat pressed against Smith's side in the back seat, her small body rigid with fear. She hadn't said a word since they left the airport. Her hands were clenched into tiny fists in her lap, her red dress wrinkled from where she'd been kneeling on the terminal floor. Every few seconds, a tremor ran through her, aftershocks of terror. Smith kept one arm around her shoulders, feeling completely out of his depth. He negotiated billion-dollar deals without breaking a sweat. He commanded boardrooms full of executives twice his age. But comforting a traumatized 6-year-old? He had no script for this. Melissa, he said softly, your mom is going to be okay. She didn't respond. Her eyes were fixed on something far away, or maybe on nothing at all. The hospital we're going to has the best doctors in the state, Smith continued, filling the silence because silence felt dangerous right now. They're going to take care of her. She's going to wake up, and she's going to be fine. You don't know that, Melissa whispered suddenly. Her voice was so quiet Smith almost missed it. He didn't have an answer to that. Because she was right, he didn't know. He was making promises he had no authority to make, speaking certainties that didn't exist. You're right, Smith admitted. I don't know for sure. But I believe it. And sometimes belief is enough to hold on to until the truth catches up. Melissa finally looked up at him, her eyes red and swollen. My teacher says you shouldn't make promises you can't keep. Your teacher is very smart, Smith said. But sometimes we make promises because someone needs to hear them. Because hope is better than fear, even if hope is just a maybe. Melissa considered this, then leaned her head against his arm. I'm scared. I know, sweetheart. I'm scared too. It was the truth. Smith Ramos, the man who had stared down hostile takeovers, navigated corporate espionage, and rebuilt his father's failing company into an empire, was terrified. Not for himself. For this little girl in a red dress who had run to him like he could save the world. When they pulled up to the emergency entrance, Melissa bolted from the car before Marcus could fully stop. Smith followed, his long strides barely keeping pace with her desperate sprint. She burst through the automatic doors into the organized chaos of the ER. My mom. Melissa shouted to no one and everyone. They brought my mom here. Where is she? A nurse at the front desk looked up, her expression shifting from annoyance to concern in an instant. She was older, with kind eyes and gray hair pulled back in a tight bun. What's your mom's name, honey? Doris. Doris Lawson. Please, where is she? The nurse glanced at her computer, then at Smith, who had just caught up. Recognition flickered across her face. She'd clearly received word of his earlier call with Dr. Patterson. Mr. Ramos, she said, standing. Mrs. Lawson is in Trauma Bay 3. Dr. Patterson is with her now. Follow me. They moved quickly through a maze of hallways, white walls, fluorescent lights, the sharp smell of antiseptic cutting through the air. Machines beeped from behind curtains. Someone groaned in pain from a nearby room. Medical staff moved with purposeful urgency, their faces professionally neutral. Melissa tried to run ahead, but Smith caught her hand gently. Slow down, sweetheart. Let's see what the doctor says first. When they reached Trauma Bay 3, Dr. Patterson was just stepping out. He was in his 50s, with silver hair and the calm demeanor of someone who had seen everything twice. But his expression was grave. Mr. Ramos, he said, nodding. Then his eyes dropped to Melissa. And you must be her daughter. Is my mom okay? Melissa asked immediately, her voice cracking. Can I see her? Dr. Patterson knelt down to her level. Smith noticed that every good person in this nightmare had done that, made themselves small for this child. Your mom is very sick, he said gently. But we're doing everything we can to help her. Right now she needs to rest, and we need to run some tests. I need you to be very brave and very patient. Can you do that? What's wrong with her? Smith asked, his voice tight. Dr. Patterson stood, his expression darkening. Severe exhaustion, malnutrition, dehydration. Her body essentially shut down. We're running a full panel, but preliminary assessment suggests she's been running on empty for a long time. Her heart is struggling, her blood pressure is dangerously low, and her organs are under significant stress. Smith felt Melissa's hand tighten around his. She understood more than she should have to. Can she die? Melissa whispered. Dr. Patterson hesitated, and that hesitation was an answer in itself. We're doing everything possible to make sure that doesn't happen, he said carefully. But the next few hours are critical. Before anyone could respond, an alarm shrieked from inside Trauma Bay 3. A nurse's voice cut through the air, sharp and urgent. She's crashing. BP dropping, 60/40. Heart rate erratic. Dr. Patterson spun and sprinted back into the room. Through the small window in the door, Smith could see organized chaos, nurses moving fast, machines beeping frantically, Dr. Patterson shouting orders. And on the bed, surrounded by people fighting for her life, was Doris, pale, motionless, dying. Mommy! Melissa screamed, lunging for the door. Smith caught her, pulling her back against his chest even as she fought him. No, sweetheart, no, let them work. Let them help her. Mommy! Mommy! Melissa was sobbing now, her small body convulsing with the force of it. Smith sank to the floor, his back against the wall, holding Melissa as she fell apart. He kept his eyes on the window, watching doctors and nurses swarm around Doris like bees protecting their queen. He could see Dr. Patterson's mouth moving, barking commands. Could see someone attaching paddles to Doris's chest. Don't look, Smith said, turning Melissa's face into his shoulder. Don't watch, sweetheart. Just hold on to me. She's dying, Melissa sobbed into his suit jacket. My mom is dying. No, Smith said, his voice fierce. No, she's not. Listen to me, Melissa. Your mom is a fighter. She works 3 jobs. She takes care of you all by herself. She's the strongest person in that room right now, and she is not giving up. Do you hear me? She's not giving up. Promise me, Melissa begged, pulling back to look at him with eyes full of desperate hope. Promise me she won't die. Smith never made promises he couldn't keep. It was a rule he'd lived by his entire adult life. Promises were contracts, and contracts had consequences when broken. But looking at this little girl, this tiny human who had run to him in an airport and grabbed onto him like he was salvation itself, Smith broke his own rule. Your mom will not die today, he said, each word deliberate and certain. I promise you. She will not die today. Melissa threw her arms around his neck and held on like she was drowning and he was air. Smith held her back just as tightly, his eyes locked on the window. Inside Trauma Bay 3, Dr. Patterson was still working. Still fighting. The machines were still screaming. And Doris Lawson's life hung in the balance, a thread stretched taut, about to snap or hold. Smith didn't pray often. Hadn't in years, really. But right now, with a sobbing child in his arms and a woman dying 20 feet away, he sent up something that wasn't quite a prayer but felt close enough. Please. Please let her live. Please don't make me break this promise. Then the machines changed tone, a long single note that meant only one thing. Flatline. Through the window, Smith watched Dr. Patterson grab the defibrillator paddles, his face set in grim determination. Clear. Doris's body jerked on the table. The monitor stayed flat. Again. Clear. Another jolt. Another desperate second. The line stayed flat. Melissa was crying so hard she was shaking. Smith held her tighter, his eyes burning, his throat tight. Come on, he whispered. Come on, Doris. Fight. Please fight. Dr. Patterson charged the paddles again. Clear. One more shock. One more eternal second. And then, a blip. A single beep. Then another. The monitor jumped, stuttered, then settled into a rhythm, weak, irregular, but there. Dr. Patterson stepped back, his shoulders dropping with relief. He wiped his forehead with his sleeve, then looked through the window directly at Smith. He gave a single, small nod. She was alive. Barely, but alive. Smith closed his eyes and pulled Melissa closer, pressing his face against her hair. She's okay, he whispered. She's okay, sweetheart. She's still fighting. Melissa was shaking too hard to respond. And Smith sat there on the cold hospital floor, holding a stranger's child, having just made a promise that almost broke. And realized that somewhere in the chaos of this impossible day, everything he thought mattered had been completely rewritten. The airport. The missed flight. The board meeting. The millions of dollars. None of it mattered. Nothing mattered except the little girl in his arms and the woman fighting for her life behind that door. And for the first time in longer than he could remember, Smith Ramos felt like he was exactly where he was supposed to be, even if it terrified him. The waiting room smelled like stale coffee and anxiety. Smith sat in an uncomfortable plastic chair with Melissa curled against his side, her head resting on his arm. She'd finally cried herself into an exhausted silence about 20 minutes ago, though her body still trembled occasionally, aftershocks of fear working their way through her small frame. They'd been there for 3 hours. 3 hours of watching the clock tick forward with excruciating slowness. 3 hours of nurses walking past with sympathetic glances, but no updates. 3 hours of Melissa asking the same question in different ways. Is she awake yet? Can we see her? Why is it taking so long? Smith had no answers. So he just held her and waited. His phone had buzzed 47 times. Calls from his assistant, his board members, investors, business partners. He'd silenced it after the first dozen. Whatever crisis they thought was happening in his empire could wait. The only crisis that mattered was behind the doors marked authorized personnel only. Around them, the ER waiting room was a theater of human suffering. An elderly man coughed wetly into a handkerchief. A teenager held an ice pack to a swollen ankle. A young mother bounced a crying baby on her hip, exhaustion carved into every line of her face. This was a world Smith had never inhabited. His medicine came from private physicians who made house calls. His emergencies were handled in sterile executive clinics with leather chairs and complimentary espresso. He'd never sat in a room like this, surrounded by people who couldn't afford to skip work for a doctor's appointment, who waited for hours because they had no other choice. It was humbling. And it made him furious. Mr. Ramos. Smith looked up sharply. Dr. Patterson stood in the doorway, still in his scrubs, a tablet tucked under one arm. His expression was unreadable, professionally neutral in that way doctors learn to mask both good and bad news. Melissa sat up immediately, her eyes wide and desperate. Can we see my mom? Dr. Patterson walked over and sat in the chair across from them, leaning forward with his elbows on his knees. The gesture alone told Smith this was going to be a long conversation. Your mom is stable, Dr. Patterson said first, and Melissa let out a sound that was half sob, half laugh. She's unconscious, but her vitals have stabilized. We've got her on 4 fluids, electrolyte replacement, and we're monitoring her cardiac function closely. But she's okay? Melissa pressed. She's gonna wake up. We expect her to regain consciousness within the next few hours, Dr. Patterson said carefully. But Melissa, I need to talk to you about why your mom collapsed. Is that okay? Melissa nodded, her small hand finding Smith's and gripping tight. Dr. Patterson glanced at Smith briefly, as if asking permission. Smith nodded. Your mom didn't collapse because she's sick, Dr. Patterson began, choosing his words with obvious care. There's no infection, no disease, nothing like that. Your mom collapsed because her body ran out of fuel. Do you understand what I mean? Melissa shook her head. It means she wasn't eating enough. She wasn't sleeping enough. She was working so hard to take care of you that she forgot to take care of herself. And eventually, her body just stopped. Like a car running out of gas. But she eats, Melissa said quietly. She always makes sure I eat. But does she eat? Dr. Patterson asked gently. Melissa went very still. Her eyes dropped to her lap. Melissa. Smith said softly. It's okay. You can tell us. Sometimes, Melissa whispered. Sometimes she says she already ate at work. Or she says she's not hungry. Or she gives me her food and says she'll eat later, but I don't think she does. Smith felt something cold settle in his chest. When was the last time you saw your mom eat a full meal? Dr. Patterson asked. Melissa thought hard, her face scrunching up with concentration. Maybe, last week? We had spaghetti. She ate some. Not a lot, but some. Last week, Dr. Patterson repeated, his voice carefully neutral. He made a note on his tablet. And sleep? Smith asked, though he already knew the answer. When does your mom sleep? She works at the diner during the day, Melissa said, her voice getting smaller with each word. And she cleans offices at night. And on weekends, she does people's laundry at the laundromat. She says she sleeps when I'm at school, but sometimes I come home and she's still in her work clothes from the night before. Like she never went to bed. Dr. Patterson and Smith exchanged a look, one that spoke volumes without words. 3 jobs, Smith said quietly. She has to, Melissa said, suddenly defensive. She says the rent is expensive and I need school supplies and new shoes and food and, her voice cracked. She works so hard for me. It's my fault. If I didn't need so much stuff, she wouldn't have to work so much. No, Smith said firmly, turning Melissa to face him. No, sweetheart. This is not your fault. Do you hear me? None of this is your fault. But. No buts. You are a child. It is not your responsibility to make sure your mom can afford to take care of you. That's what adults are supposed to do. Your mom loves you so much that she worked herself sick to give you everything you need. But that doesn't mean it's your fault. Okay. Melissa's eyes filled with tears again. She always says she's fine. Every time I ask if she's tired or if she's okay, she smiles and says, I'm fine, baby girl. But she's lying, isn't she? She lies because she doesn't want me to worry. She lies because she loves you, Smith said gently. Because parents try to protect their children, even when they're falling apart. Dr. Patterson cleared his throat. Melissa, I need to ask you something else. Does your mom have any family? Grandparents, aunts, uncles, anyone who helps out? Just us, Melissa said. My grandma died when I was little. And my dad. She trailed off, her face clouding. It's okay, Smith said. You don't have to talk about that. Dr. Patterson made another note. What about friends? Neighbors? Mom doesn't really have time for friends, Melissa said simply. She's always working. The full picture was taking shape now, and it was devastating. A single mother with no support system, no safety net, no backup plan. Working 3 jobs to keep her daughter fed and housed. Skipping meals. Sacrificing sleep. pushing her body past every reasonable limit until it finally gave out on an airport floor. And no one had noticed. No one had helped. No one had even asked if she was okay. Until she collapsed. Smith's phone buzzed again in his pocket. He pulled it out, glanced at the screen, his CFO, probably calling about the Tokyo meeting, and powered it off completely. "Mr. Ramos," Dr. Patterson said, "I need to be honest with you about something. Mrs. Lawson's recovery isn't going to be fast. She needs at least a week of hospitalization, maybe more. Complete bed rest, nutritional rehabilitation, cardiac monitoring. And when she's discharged, she'll need several weeks of recovery at home before she can return to work." "Several weeks," Smith repeated. "Without working." "Without working," Dr. Patterson confirmed. "Her body needs time to heal." Melissa made a small, frightened sound. "But how will we pay rent? How will we buy food? If Mom can't work for weeks?" She didn't finish the sentence. She didn't need to. Smith had made billions by seeing problems and calculating solutions faster than anyone else in the room. And right now the problem was clear. Without income, Doris and Melissa would lose everything. Their apartment. Their stability. Maybe even each other, if social services got involved. "Don't worry about that," Smith said before he could think it through. "I'll take care of it." "You can't," Melissa started. "I can. And I will." His tone left no room for argument. Dr. Patterson studied him for a long moment. "That's very generous of you, Mr. Ramos. But I have to ask, what's your relationship to this family? For the medical records." Smith hesitated. What was his relationship? 12 hours ago, he didn't know these people existed. Now he was making promises about rent and bills and recovery time. He struggled for the right words. "I'm helping." "I can see that," Dr. Patterson said carefully. "But the hospital needs to know who's authorized to make medical decisions if Mrs. Lawson is unable to. Who has guardianship of the child? Who's financially responsible for the care?" Every question was a door Smith was walking through without knowing what was on the other side. "I am," he said finally. "I'm taking responsibility for both of them." Dr. Patterson nodded slowly, making notes. "We'll need paperwork. Legal documentation. The social worker will want to speak with you." "Fine. Whatever's needed. Mr. Ramos." Dr. Patterson set down his tablet and leaned forward. "I want to make sure you understand what you're committing to here. This isn't just paying some bills. This is becoming legally and financially responsible for a woman and child you barely know. There are procedures, investigations, oversight. Are you prepared for that?" Smith looked down at Melissa, who was watching him with those wide, hopeful eyes that had seen too much fear for one day. "Yes," he said. "I'm prepared." It might have been the most reckless decision he'd ever made. But it was also the only decision that felt right. Dr. Patterson stood. "All right. I'll start the paperwork. You can see Mrs. Lawson in about an hour, once we have her settled in a recovery room." He walked a few steps toward the door, then paused and turned back. "Mr. Ramos? What you're doing here, it's a good thing. Just make sure you're doing it for the right reasons." Before Smith could respond, the door to the ER bay swung open again. A different doctor emerged, younger female, with dark circles under her eyes and a grim expression that made Smith's stomach drop. She scanned the waiting room, then locked eyes with Smith. "Are you the one responsible for Doris Lawson and her child?" she asked. Smith stood slowly, his heart suddenly pounding. "Yes." "What's wrong? What happened?" The doctor walked over, her expression carefully controlled. "I'm Dr. Chen, nephrology. I need to speak with you about Mrs. Lawson's test results. In private." The way she said "in private," while glancing at Melissa, made Smith's blood run cold. "Is my mom okay?" Melissa asked, panic rising in her voice. Dr. Chen forced a small smile. "Your mom is stable, honey. I just need to talk to Mr. Ramos about some medical things that are a little complicated." "Okay." Smith knelt down to Melissa. "Stay right here. I'll be back in 2 minutes. I promise." Melissa grabbed his hand. "You promise she's okay?" Smith hesitated, and Dr. Chen's expression told him everything he needed to know. Something was very, very wrong. "I'll be right back," he said, standing. He followed Dr. Chen into a small consultation room off the main hallway. The moment the door closed, her professional mask dropped. "Mr. Ramos, how much do you know about Mrs. Lawson's medical history?" "Nothing. I met her daughter 4 hours ago." "Why? What did you find?" Dr. Chen pulled up something on her tablet and turned it to face him. "Mrs. Lawson's kidney function is severely compromised. Her labs show markers consistent with chronic kidney disease, possibly stage 3 or 4. Combined with the malnutrition and dehydration, her organs are under critical stress." Smith's medical knowledge was limited, but he knew enough to understand what she was saying. "How bad is it?" "If she continues at this pace, no treatment, no rest, continued stress on her body, she'll need dialysis within a year. Maybe less. And eventually—" Dr. Chen trailed off, but the implication was clear. "Eventually she'll die," Smith finished. "Yes." The room felt too small suddenly. Too airless. "Does she know?" Smith asked. "I don't know. These markers don't appear overnight. She may have been experiencing symptoms for months. But if she was ignoring them, prioritizing work over her health—" Dr. Chen shook her head. "A lot of people in her situation do." Smith thought of Melissa asking when her mom last ate. Of the 3 jobs. Of the lies that everything was fine. Doris had been dying in slow motion for months. And she'd hidden it from everyone, maybe even herself. "What does she need?" Smith asked. "Treatment. Monitoring. Medication. Lifestyle changes. And most importantly, she needs to stop working herself to death." Dr. Chen fixed him with a hard stare. "You said you're taking responsibility for this family. That means making sure she actually follows through with treatment. That means financial support so she's not forced to choose between her health and keeping her daughter fed. Can you do that?" Smith didn't hesitate. "Yes. It's not cheap. I don't care." Dr. Chen studied him for a long moment, then nodded. "All right. I'll add my recommendations to her care plan. But Mr. Ramos," she paused at the door, "that little girl out there has already almost lost her mother once today. Make sure she doesn't have to go through it again." The door closed behind her, leaving Smith alone in the small room. He stood there for a moment, processing everything. The kidney disease. The months of decline. The fact that if he'd walked away at the airport, Doris Lawson would probably be dead within a year, and Melissa would be alone. His phone buzzed one more time in his pocket, still getting notifications even though it was powered off, apparently. He pulled it out and looked at the screen. 73 missed calls. Hundreds of emails. His entire world demanding his attention. And he realized something profound. None of it mattered. Not compared to this. He powered the phone off again, dropped it back in his pocket, and walked back out to the waiting room. Melissa looked up the moment she saw him, her eyes searching his face. "Is everything okay?" she asked in a small voice. Smith sat down next to her and put his arm around her shoulders. "Everything's going to be okay," he said. And for the first time that day, he believed it. Because he was going to make sure of it. Whatever it took. Smith signed the paperwork at 11:47 p.m. The hospital administrator, a thin man named Gerald with wire-rimmed glasses, had been apologetic about the late hour, but Smith had insisted. He wanted everything handled before Doris woke up. No confusion, no panic about bills she couldn't pay, no decisions she'd have to make while recovering. The total estimated cost for the week-long stay, including all treatments, medications, and specialist consultations, comes to approximately $48,000, Gerald said, sliding the itemized breakdown across his desk. "That's without insurance, of course. Does Mrs. Lawson have?" "No," Smith interrupted. "She doesn't. Bill everything to this account. He handed over a black credit card that Gerald handled like it might explode. All of it? Up front. All of it. And I want her moved to a private recovery room on the executive floor. Quiet, comfortable. Nothing that feels like a hospital if you can help it. Gerald blinked. Mr. Ramos, the executive floor is typically reserved for. I'm aware. I funded the wing's construction 3 years ago. I think that earns me the right to request a room. Of course. Yes. Absolutely. Gerald typed rapidly, then hesitated. Sir, I have to ask, for our records, what is your relationship to the patient? It was the same question everyone kept asking. And Smith still didn't have a good answer. I'm the person making sure she survives, he said simply. Gerald seemed to accept that. Within 20 minutes, the paperwork was complete, the payment processed, and Smith was walking back through the quiet hospital corridors toward Doris's new room. It was just after midnight when they moved her. Smith watched from the hallway as nurses carefully transferred her to a bed in a room that looked more like a hotel suite than a hospital. Large windows with blackout curtains. A comfortable chair that converted to a sleeper. Soft lighting instead of harsh fluorescence. Melissa had fallen asleep against Smith's shoulder an hour ago. He'd been carrying her ever since, her small body limp with exhaustion, her face pressed against his now rumpled suit jacket. He'd never held a sleeping child before. Had never realized how completely they trusted you when they were unconscious, how vulnerable that trust was. A nurse, the same kind-faced woman from earlier, smiled at him as she adjusted Doris's fore. You can bring her in now, she said softly. The patient should wake up soon. The sedatives are wearing off. Smith carried Melissa into the room and stood there awkwardly, unsure where to put her. The nurse seemed to understand his confusion. Here, she said, gently taking Melissa from his arms and laying her carefully on the bed next to Doris. Skin-to-skin contact is good for both of them. Helps with stress and recovery. Melissa immediately curled into her mother's side, her small hand clutching Doris's hospital gown. Even unconscious, both of them seemed to relax, two pieces of the same soul finding each other again. She's going to be okay, the nurse said to Smith. You did a good thing today. Then she left, and Smith was alone with two sleeping strangers who had somehow become his entire world in less than 12 hours. He stood in the corner of the room, hands in his pockets, feeling completely out of place. His blue suit was wrinkled now, stained with Melissa's tears. His tie was loosened. His hair, usually perfectly styled, was a mess from running his hands through it too many times. He looked like he'd been through a war. Maybe he had. The room was quiet except for the soft beep of the heart monitor and the whisper of the air conditioning. Through the window the city glowed, thousands of lights representing thousands of lives, each one fighting their own battles, carrying their own weight. Smith had built an empire in that city. Had conquered markets, crushed competitors, negotiated deals that shifted millions of dollars with a single signature. He'd been called ruthless, brilliant, unstoppable. But standing in this room, watching a woman and her daughter sleep, he felt like none of that mattered. Like all the power and money and success he'd accumulated was just noise compared to this simple, profound moment. Being present when someone needed help. He didn't know how long he stood there. Time felt strange, stretched thin like taffy. But eventually, Doris stirred. It started small, a twitch of her fingers, a flutter of her eyelids. Then her breathing changed, becoming less deep, more conscious. The heart monitor beeped slightly faster. Smith straightened, suddenly alert. Doris's eyes opened slowly, squinting against even the dim light. She blinked several times, disoriented, her gaze unfocused. Then her eyes tracked across the room, taking inventory. 4 line in her left arm. Another in her right. Electrodes on her chest connected to a monitor displaying numbers she probably didn't understand. Soft white walls. Expensive-looking furniture. Then her gaze dropped to her chest, where Melissa was sleeping, and her entire body relaxed. Her hand moved, slowly, weakly, to rest on her daughter's head, fingers tangling in those natural curls. "Melissa," she whispered, her voice rough and dry. "She's okay," Smith said quietly from his corner. "She's just sleeping." Doris's head snapped toward his voice, and for the first time, their eyes met. Smith had negotiated with billionaires, spoken to rooms full of hundreds, stared down hostile board members. But something about Doris Lawson's gaze made him feel exposed in a way he'd never experienced. Her eyes were dark brown, exhausted but sharp. Intelligent. Wary. She studied him like she was calculating his net worth, his intentions, and his threat level all in the same glance. "Who are you?" she asked. Her voice was hoarse but surprisingly strong. "My name is Smith Ramos. I was at the airport when I collapsed," Doris finished, her expression tightening. "I remember pieces. Melissa screaming. Not being able to move. Then nothing." Her eyes dropped to her daughter again, and something painful flickered across her face. "She saw me collapse." "She did," Smith said gently. "And she ran for help. She ran to me." "Why you?" It was a fair question. "I don't know," Smith admitted. "I was just there. And she asked me to help. So I did." Doris watched him for a long moment, her expression unreadable. Then she tried to sit up, and immediately the heart monitor started beeping frantically as her face went pale. Smith moved without thinking, crossing the room in 3 strides and catching her shoulders as she started to fall sideways. His hands gripped her gently but firmly, steadying her, and for a moment they were frozen like that, his hands on her shoulders, her face inches from his chest, both of them breathing hard. The electricity of the moment hit Smith like a physical force. He could feel her trembling, could see the fine lines of exhaustion around her eyes, could smell the antiseptic hospital soap on her skin mixed with something else, something warm and human and real. She was so fragile. And so strong. Both at the same time. "Easy," Smith said softly, helping her lean back against the pillows. "You've been through a lot. You need to rest." "I need to," Doris stopped, wincing as pain flashed across her face. "I need to get out of here. I can't afford this. I don't even know what this room costs per night, but I can guarantee I can't pay for it." "It's handled." Doris's eyes snapped to his, suddenly sharp with suspicion. "What do you mean, handled?" "I mean it's paid for. All of it. The room, the treatment, everything." Her face went very still. "You paid my hospital bills." "Yes." "Why?" "Because you needed help." "Bullshit." The word came out hard, cold. Nobody just pays $40,000 in hospital bills for a stranger out of the goodness of their heart. Especially not men in $1,000 suits. Her eyes raked over him, taking in every detail of his expensive clothes, his Rolex, the subtle markers of wealth he couldn't hide. "What do you want from me?" Smith should have expected this. Should have prepared for it. But somehow he hadn't. "I don't want anything from you," he said. "Then why are you here? Why did you pay for this?" She gestured around the obviously expensive room. "Why did you bring my daughter to the hospital? Why are you standing in my room at," she glanced at the clock, "past midnight like some kind of guardian angel? Who are you really?" Smith opened his mouth, then closed it. Because he didn't have a good answer. Not one that made sense even to himself. "I'm someone who was in the right place at the right time," he said finally. "Or the wrong place, depending on how you look at it. I missed my flight. Your daughter asked me for help. Everything else just happened." Doris studied him with those sharp, exhausted eyes. "You're lying." "I'm not. Not about the facts. About the reasons." She shifted, careful not to wake Melissa, and fixed him with a look that made Smith feel like she could see straight through him. "Nobody does what you did today without a reason. Nobody cancels their entire day to sit in a hospital with a stranger's kid. Nobody pays bills like that without expecting something in return." "Some people do," Smith said quietly. "Not in my world they don't." Doris's voice was bitter now, tinged with something hard that came from experience. "In my world, when rich men offer to help, there's always a price. Always strings attached. Always something they want that you don't want to give. Smith felt something twist in his chest, part anger, part sadness. Because she was right to be suspicious. She'd probably learned that lesson the hard way. "I'm not like that," he said. "You say that now." "I mean it." Doris laughed, a dry, painful sound. "You want to know what I think? I think you're some guilty billionaire who saw a chance to play hero for a day. Make yourself feel good about all the money you have while people like me are dying in airport terminals. Tomorrow you'll go back to your real life and will just be a nice story you tell at dinner parties." Each word landed like a physical blow. Because there was truth in them, or at least, there would have been truth in them this morning. "Maybe that was true 12 hours ago," Smith said slowly. "But it's not true now." "Why? What changed?" Smith looked at Melissa, still sleeping peacefully on her mother's chest. Then he looked back at Doris, at this woman who had worked 3 jobs to keep her daughter fed, who had skipped meals and sleep and her own health to be a good mother, who was suspicious and defensive and scared because the world had taught her that help always came with a price. "I don't know," he admitted. "But something did." Doris watched him for a long moment. Then, so quietly he almost missed it. "Why would a man like you help someone like me?" It was the question Smith had been asking himself all day. The question everyone had been asking him. The question he still didn't have a real answer to. Because it was the right thing to do wasn't enough. "Because your daughter asked me to," didn't explain why he was still here at midnight, why he'd paid $48,000 without blinking, why he'd canceled his entire life to sit in a waiting room with a crying child. "I don't know," Smith said honestly. "But I think maybe I needed help too. I just didn't know it until your daughter ran to me in that airport." Doris's expression shifted, surprise flickering across her exhausted features. "What could you possibly need help with?" she asked. "You're clearly rich. Successful. You probably have everything you've ever wanted." Smith looked around the expensive hospital room, at the evidence of his wealth, his power, his success. Then he looked back at Doris and Melissa, curled together on the bed. "I have everything except the things that matter," he said quietly. The words hung in the air between them, raw, honest, vulnerable in a way Smith never allowed himself to be. Doris stared at him, her suspicion warring with something else. Something softer. "You're either the best liar I've ever met," she whispered, "or the strangest man I've ever met." "Maybe both," Smith said with a small, sad smile. Doris's eyes were starting to droop now, the medication and exhaustion pulling her back under. But she fought it, her gaze locked on his. "Don't break her heart," she said, her voice fading. "Melissa, she gets attached. She trusts people. Don't make her regret that." "I won't," Smith promised. "And don't break mine either," Doris added, so quietly he wasn't sure he was supposed to hear it. Then her eyes closed, and she was asleep again, her hand still resting protectively on her daughter's head. Smith stood there in the quiet room, his heart pounding, replaying her last words in his mind. "Don't break mine either." As if her heart was already at risk. As if he already had the power to hurt her. As if something was beginning between them that neither of them had planned or expected. Smith sank into the chair in the corner, suddenly exhausted. He should leave. Should go home, shower, sleep in his own bed. Should return to his real life and let these people recover without him hovering. But he didn't move. Because Doris had asked him a question he couldn't answer. Why would a man like him help someone like her? And sitting there in the dark, watching them sleep, Smith realized the truth. Maybe he wasn't helping them at all. Maybe they were helping him. The argument started over breakfast. Smith had arranged for the hospital's private kitchen to prepare a real meal, not the standard hospital fare, but actual food. Scrambled eggs with herbs, fresh fruit, whole wheat toast, orange juice. He'd had it delivered to Doris's room at 8 a.m., along with a smaller plate for Melissa with chocolate chip pancakes shaped like butterflies. He'd thought it was a nice gesture. Doris saw it as another intrusion. "You can't keep doing this," she said, pushing the tray away with more force than necessary. She'd been awake for an hour, had already argued with 2 nurses about getting discharged, and was now sitting up in bed with her arms crossed defensively. I didn't ask for special meals. I didn't ask for any of this. You collapsed from starvation, Smith said calmly from his chair in the corner, the same chair he'd slept in for the past 2 nights. His back was killing him, his suit was beyond wrinkled, and he was running on 4 hours of sleep total. But he wasn't leaving. Eating properly isn't a luxury. It's medical treatment. It's charity. And I don't take charity. It's breakfast. And you need to eat. What I need, Doris said, her voice tight, is for you to stop making decisions for me like I'm incapable of taking care of myself. Melissa, who had been quietly coloring in a new coloring book Smith had brought her, looked up with worried eyes. She'd been glued to Smith's side for 2 days straight, holding his hand during doctor visits, falling asleep against his shoulder during evening TV, asking him to read her stories from books he'd bought at the hospital gift shop. The attachment had formed so quickly it should have felt strange. But somehow it didn't. "Mommy, you should eat," Melissa said softly. "The pancakes are really good. Mr. Smith got them special for me." "I know, baby girl." Doris's voice softened instantly when speaking to her daughter. "But Mr. Smith needs to understand that we can take care of ourselves." "Can you?" Smith asked, and immediately regretted it when Doris's eyes flashed with anger. "Excuse me. Can you take care of yourself? Because 2 days ago you were dying on an airport floor. Because you've been working yourself to death for months, maybe years. Because according to Dr. Chun, your kidneys are failing and you never told anyone, probably not even yourself." Doris went very still. "You had no right to discuss my medical information." "I had every right. I'm listed as your emergency contact because you don't have anyone else. The doctors needed authorization for treatment, and I gave it. Someone had to." "You're not family," Doris shot back. "No, but I'm here. Which is more than can be said for anyone else." The words came out harsher than Smith intended. He saw them land, saw Doris flinch like he'd slapped her. "That's not fair," she said quietly. "You're right. I'm sorry." Smith ran a hand through his hair, exhausted and frustrated in equal measure. "I'm not trying to attack you. I'm trying to help you. I didn't ask for your help. Your daughter did. She's 6 years old. She doesn't understand. She understands that her mother almost died. She understands that you work 3 jobs and never sleep and skip meals so she can eat. She understands more than you think, Doris." Doris's jaw tightened. "Don't tell me what my daughter understands. Then don't tell me to walk away when I'm the only person standing between your family and complete disaster." The silence that followed was heavy, charged. They stared at each other across the hospital room, 2 stubborn people, both used to being in control, both terrified of depending on anyone. "Why are you really still here?" Doris asked finally, her voice low. "You paid my bills. You got me help. You can leave with a clear conscience. So why are you still here?" Smith opened his mouth to respond, but no words came out. Because he didn't have a good answer. Not one that made sense even to him. "I don't know," he admitted. "That's not good enough. It's the truth." "The truth is you feel guilty," Doris said, her eyes hard. "Rich people love feeling guilty. It makes them feel human. You'll stay here for a few days, play hero, then go back to your real life and forget we ever existed. You don't know anything about me. I know your type. I've cleaned offices for men like you. I've served coffee to men like you. I know exactly who you are." Something hot and angry flared in Smith's chest. "Then you know nothing. Because if you did, you'd understand that I don't do anything halfway. When I commit to something, I see it through." "You've committed to us?" Doris's laugh was sharp, bitter. "We're not a business deal, Smith. We're people. We're not a problem you can throw money at and fix. I'm not trying to fix you." "Yes, you are. You've been trying to fix everything since the moment you walked into my life. The bills, the specialists, the private room, the toys for Melissa, the special meals. You're trying to fix everything because it makes you feel better about the fact that people like me exist in your world." That's not. You can't handle it, Doris continued, her voice rising. You can't handle the fact that I was dying right in front of you, that my daughter was terrified, that we were completely helpless. So you're trying to fix it all, control it all, make it neat and manageable. But life isn't neat, Smith. Poverty isn't neat. And you can't fix me with your credit card. I never said I could. Then what are you doing here? Doris shouted. I'm trying to keep you alive. Smith shouted back. The words echoed in the room, raw and honest. Doris stared at him, breathing hard. Why? Because you nearly died, Smith said, his voice breaking. Because when the paramedics shocked your heart 3 times and it finally started beating again, I was holding your daughter and promising her you'd be okay. Because I watched you flatline behind those ER doors and I've never been more terrified in my entire life. Because... He stopped, swallowing hard. Because why? Doris whispered. Smith looked at her, really looked at her. At her exhausted eyes and defensive posture and the pride that wouldn't let her accept help even when she desperately needed it. At the woman who had worked herself nearly to death for her daughter. Who had sacrificed everything and asked for nothing. Because you deserve to live, he said quietly. Because Melissa deserves to have her mother. Because I don't want to live in a world where people like you have to die just to survive. Doris's eyes filled with tears. She blinked rapidly, trying to hold them back. I can't owe you, she said, her voice trembling. I can't owe anyone. Because when you owe people, they own you. And I've spent my whole life making sure nobody owns me or my daughter. You don't owe me anything. I owe you $48,000. I owe you 2 days of your time. I owe you. You don't owe me anything, Smith repeated firmly. This isn't a transaction, Doris. This is just me being human. Trying to be human. Maybe for the first time in a long time. Doris wiped her eyes roughly with the back of her hand. I don't understand you. I don't understand me either, Smith admitted. But I'm not leaving. Not until I know you and Melissa are safe. And then what? You just disappear back to your billionaire life. Before Smith could answer, the door burst open. Melissa stood in the doorway, tears streaming down her face, her coloring book clutched to her chest. Please stop fighting, she sobbed. Please. I don't want you to fight. Both adults froze. Doris immediately opened her arms. Baby girl, come here. But Melissa ran to Smith first, throwing her arms around his waist and burying her face in his wrinkled suit jacket. Don't leave, she cried. Please don't leave us. Please. Smith's heart shattered. He knelt down and held her, feeling her small body shake with sobs. I'm not leaving, he promised. I'm right here. You and Mommy were yelling. People yell before they leave. My daddy yelled at Mommy a lot before he left forever. Doris made a sound like she'd been punched. Smith pulled back and looked at Melissa's tear-stained face. Your mom and I were just talking loudly. We weren't yelling at each other. We were just discussing things. Adults do that sometimes. It doesn't mean anyone's leaving. Promise. I promise. Melissa looked over at her mother, her eyes pleading. Mommy. Doris was crying now too, silent tears sliding down her cheeks. Come here, baby. Melissa ran to the bed and climbed up carefully, snuggling into her mother's side. Doris wrapped her arms around her daughter and pressed her face into those natural curls, her shoulders shaking. I'm sorry, Doris whispered. I'm so sorry you heard that. I don't want Mr. Smith to leave, Melissa said into her mother's hospital gown. He reads me stories. And he doesn't get mad when I ask questions. And he stayed with me when you were sleeping. I don't want him to go away like Daddy did. Doris looked up at Smith over Melissa's head. Their eyes met, and something passed between them, understanding maybe. Or recognition. Or the beginning of something neither of them knew how to name. He's not going anywhere, Doris said quietly, still looking at Smith. Are you? It was a question and a challenge and a plea all at once. No, Smith said. I'm not. They sat in silence for a long moment, Doris holding Melissa, Smith standing awkwardly near the door, all three of them processing what had just happened. Finally, Doris spoke. I need to get out of here, she said suddenly. I need to go home. Check on the apartment. Make sure rent's been paid. You need to rest, Smith interrupted gently. I've been resting for 2 days. I feel fine. Doris. I'm leaving. She started to swing her legs out of bed. Today. Right now. I'll sign whatever forms they need, but I'm not staying here another night. The doctors said at least a week. I don't care what the doctors said. Doris stood up, one hand gripping the four-pole for balance. I need to take care of my responsibilities. I need to. She took one step and her legs buckled. Smith caught her before she hit the floor. For the second time in 3 days, Doris collapsed into his arms. But this time she was conscious, and the look in her eyes as she stared up at him was pure devastation. I can't even stand, she whispered. I can't even stand up. You've been through trauma, Smith said softly, carefully helping her sit on the edge of the bed. Your body needs time to heal. I don't have time. Doris's voice cracked. I have rent due in 5 days. I have bills. I have shifts I'm missing. I'll take care of it. You can't. I can. And I will. Smith knelt in front of her, his hands steadying her shoulders. Doris, look at me. Please. She did, reluctantly. You are not alone anymore, Smith said, every word deliberate. I know you don't trust that. I know you don't trust me. But I'm asking you to try. For 1 week. Let me help you for 1 week. Let your body heal. Let Melissa see her mother get better. And if after that week you want me to leave and never come back, I will. But please. Please don't kill yourself trying to be strong enough for everyone. Doris stared at him, her eyes searching his face for lies, for ulterior motives, for the catch she was sure existed. Why? She whispered. Why do you care? Smith didn't have an answer that made sense. But he had the truth. Because when I look at you, I don't see someone who needs fixing, he said quietly. I see someone who deserves better than the hand life dealt them. And maybe I can't fix everything. Maybe I can't make poverty neat or manageable or fair. But I can make sure you don't die trying to survive it. A tear slid down Doris's cheek. Behind them, Melissa was watching with wide eyes. And in that moment, something shifted. Some invisible wall between them cracked just enough to let light through. Doris took a shaky breath. 1 week, she said finally. And then we talk about what happens next. 1 week, Smith agreed. Doris nodded, then let him help her back into bed. She was trembling, from exhaustion or fear or maybe just the terrifying vulnerability of accepting help. Smith pulled the blanket over her, and Melissa immediately curled back into her mother's side. Thank you, Doris whispered so quietly he almost missed it. Smith nodded, not trusting his voice. He returned to his chair in the corner, but everything felt different now. The air felt different. The silence felt different. Doris closed her eyes, one hand tangled in Melissa's hair, the other resting on the edge of the bed, palm up open. An invitation, maybe. Or maybe just exhaustion. Smith didn't reach for her hand. Not yet. But he stayed. And for now, that was enough. The apartment building was in a neighborhood Smith had driven past 1,000 times but never really seen. Cracked sidewalks. Graffiti tags on brick walls. A bodega on the corner with bars on the windows. Laundry hanging from fire escapes. The kind of place where people survived rather than lived. Smith stood outside the entrance, a heavy metal door with a broken buzzer system, holding the key Doris had reluctantly given him that morning. 3rd floor, apartment 3C, she'd said, not meeting his eyes. Just check that the door's locked. Make sure nobody broke in. That's all I need you to do. But Smith knew what she really meant. Please don't judge me. Please don't see how little we have. He climbed the narrow stairwell, The elevator had an out-of-order sign that looked permanently installed. The walls were covered in peeling paint and old water stains. Somewhere above, a baby cried. Somewhere below, a TV blared. When he reached 3C, Smith stood there for a moment with his hand on the doorknob, preparing himself. Then he opened the door. The apartment was smaller than his walk-in closet. One main room that served as living room, dining room, and kitchen combined. A tiny hallway leading to what he assumed was a bedroom and bathroom. Windows that faced a brick wall 3 feet away, letting in almost no natural light. But it was clean. Desperately, carefully clean. Like someone had scrubbed every surface with pride and hope and the determination to make nothing into something. Smith stepped inside and closed the door behind him. The couch had duct tape holding one armrest together. The coffee table was an overturned plastic crate with a tablecloth draped over it. The small dining table, barely big enough for two, wobbled on uneven legs. He walked to the kitchen area. Opened the refrigerator. A half-gallon of milk, nearly empty. 3 eggs. A jar of peanut butter. Some wilted lettuce. A child's juice box. That was it. Smith stood there staring at the empty shelves, feeling something cold settle in his chest. This was what Doris had been defending. This was what she'd worked 3 jobs to maintain. This tiny, sparse, barely surviving existence. And she'd been proud of it because it was hers. He closed the refrigerator and looked around the apartment with new eyes. Bills covered the small table. Smith picked them up carefully, reading through them. Rent notice, past due. Electric bill, final warning. Medical bills from a clinic visit 3 months ago. All of them stamped with red ink, all of them threatening, all of them adding up to more than Doris probably made in 2 months. Then Smith saw the drawings. They were everywhere. Taped to the walls, stuck to the refrigerator with magnets, covering every surface. Crayon drawings in a child's hand, houses with smiling suns, flowers with faces, stick figure people holding hands. Smith moved closer, studying them. One showed 2 stick figures, one tall with curly hair, one small with a red dress. Me and Mommy written in wobbly letters at the bottom. Another showed the same 2 figures sitting at a table with a birthday cake. Best birthday ever, even though the cake looked more like a blob. Smith's throat tightened. This was Melissa's world. This cramped apartment with broken furniture and an empty fridge, this was what she knew as home. And she'd drawn it like it was a castle. Then he saw it. A drawing near the window, newer than the others. 3 stick figures this time, one tall with curly hair, one small in a red dress, and one very tall in what might have been a blue suit. All 3 holding hands. At the bottom, in Melissa's careful handwriting, "My family when Mr. Smith is with us." Smith stared at that drawing for a long time. My family. Not the nice man helping my mom. Not the stranger at the hospital. Family. He pulled out his phone with trembling hands and took a picture of it. Then he very carefully removed it from the wall, folded it, and put it in his jacket pocket. He couldn't leave it here. He needed to keep it close. The door opened behind him. Smith spun around, startled. A neighbor stood in the hallway, an elderly woman with gray hair and suspicious eyes. "Who are you? What are you doing in Doris's apartment?" Smith realized how this looked, a wealthy stranger in an expensive suit, alone in an apartment that wasn't his. "Doris asked me to check on things while she's in the hospital." The woman's expression softened slightly. "Hospital? Is she okay? Is Melissa with her?" "She's stable. Getting better. Melissa is fine. Thank God." The woman clutched her chest. "I was worried when I didn't hear them for a few days. Doris is good people. Works too hard, but good people." She studied Smith more carefully. "You the one who helped her? Melissa's been talking about you. You know Melissa. I watch her sometimes when Doris has to work late. That little girl is an angel. Draws me pictures, helps me with my groceries." The woman smiled. "She told me a nice man in a blue suit saved her mommy. Said he was like a superhero." Smith felt something warm bloom in his chest. I'm just someone who was in the right place at the right time. Well, you tell Doris that Mrs. Chun says not to worry about rent this week. Her landlord's a bastard, but I know the building manager. I'll handle it. Actually, Smith said carefully, the rent is taken care of. And next month's. And the month after that. Mrs. Chen's eyes widened. You paid her rent? I'm making sure she has time to recover without worrying. The elderly woman studied him for a long moment, then nodded approvingly. You're a good man. Doris needs someone good. She's been alone too long. After Mrs. Chen left, Smith stood in the quiet apartment and made a decision. He couldn't fix everything, but he could fix some things. He started with the wobbly table, tightened the screws, shimmed one leg with folded cardboard until it stood level. Then he tackled the broken drawer in the kitchen that wouldn't close properly. The dripping faucet in the bathroom. The loose cabinet door. Small things. Things anyone could do. But things Doris had never had time to fix because she was too busy surviving. When he finished, Smith looked at his watch. 4 hours had passed. He pulled out his phone and made several calls. The first was to a grocery delivery service. I need a full order delivered to this address within the hour. Fresh vegetables, fruit, meat, milk, eggs, bread, pasta, rice, everything a family needs for 2 weeks. And juice boxes. Lots of juice boxes. The second was to a furniture store. I need a new couch delivered tomorrow. Something durable but comfortable. And a proper coffee table. And a bed frame full size. The third call was to his assistant. Cancel tomorrow's board meeting. And the site visit on Thursday. And the investor dinner on Friday. Sir, the Tokyo deal. Reschedule it. But they've been waiting for months. If you cancel now, we might lose the entire. Then we lose it, Smith said firmly. Some things are more important than business deals. His assistant was silent for a moment. Are you okay, Mr. Ramos? You've never missed a major deal before. I'm better than I've been in years, Smith said honestly. Just handle it. He hung up before his assistant could argue further. The grocery delivery arrived 45 minutes later. Smith spent 20 minutes organizing everything in the kitchen, filling the refrigerator and cupboards. Melissa would come home to a full fridge. Doris wouldn't have to worry about what they'd eat. As he was leaving, Smith's phone rang. Unknown number. He answered. Hello. Mr. Ramos? This is Richard Chun from AsiaLink Corporation. I'm calling about the Tokyo deal. Your assistant said you're rescheduling. Smith closed his eyes. The Tokyo deal. $40 million. Months of negotiations. His company's expansion into Asian markets. Yes, I need to reschedule. Mr. Ramos, with all due respect, we've been waiting for this meeting for 6 months. If you cancel now, we'll have to assume you're not serious about this partnership. I understand. But I have a personal emergency that requires my attention. A personal emergency? Richard's tone was skeptical. Mr. Ramos, we're talking about a $40 million deal. What kind of emergency is more important than? The kind that matters more than money, Smith said quietly. Silence on the other end. Then, I don't understand. I didn't either, Smith admitted. But I'm starting to. So you're walking away from $40 million? Smith thought about Melissa's drawing. About Doris collapsing in his arms. About the empty refrigerator and the bills piled on the table, and the woman who had worked herself nearly to death just to keep her daughter safe. Yes, he said. I am. You're making a mistake. Maybe. But it's my mistake to make. He hung up. For a moment, Smith just stood there in the tiny apartment, surrounded by Melissa's drawings and the evidence of Doris's struggle and the smell of fresh groceries filling empty cupboards. He should feel panicked. Should be calculating the financial loss, the damage to his reputation, the opportunities slipping away. But he didn't feel any of that. He felt right. For the first time in his entire adult life, Smith Ramos felt like he was exactly where he was supposed to be, doing exactly what he was supposed to do. Even if it cost him $40 million. Even if it cost him everything. He locked the apartment behind him and headed back to the hospital, the drawing still folded carefully in his jacket pocket, right over his heart. When Smith walked into Doris's hospital room an hour later, she was awake, sitting up in bed with Melissa coloring beside her. "How's the apartment?" Doris asked, trying to sound casual but unable to hide the anxiety in her voice. "It's good. Everything's locked up. Mrs. Chun says hello." Doris relaxed slightly. "She's a sweet lady. Watches Melissa sometimes when I have overlapping shifts." She mentioned that. Smith sat in his usual chair. I took care of a few things while I was there." Doris's eyes narrowed suspiciously. "What kind of things?" "Fixed the table. The leaky faucet. Some cabinets. Small stuff." Smith. "And I may have ordered some groceries. Just basics. Milk, eggs, bread. Things you'll need when you get home." Smith. "And possibly a new couch. Yours had some structural issues." Smith. Doris's voice was sharp now, but not angry. "Something else. Something more complicated." "I couldn't help it," Smith said, holding up his hands defensively. "Your table was wobbling. It was a safety hazard." Doris stared at him for a long moment. Then, so quietly he almost missed it, "Why do you keep doing things like this?" Before Smith could answer, Melissa tugged on his sleeve. "Mr. Smith? Did you see my drawing? The one with all three of us?" Smith's throat tightened. He pulled the folded paper from his pocket and carefully unfolded it. "I did see it," he said softly. "It's beautiful, Melissa." "That's my family," Melissa explained, pointing at each stick figure. "That's Mommy, that's me, and that's you. We're all together." Doris's breath caught. She stared at the drawing, then at Smith, her eyes wide. "Melissa, honey," she said carefully, "Mr. Smith isn't." "He feels like family," Melissa interrupted simply. "Doesn't he feel like family to you, Mommy?" The question hung in the air. Doris looked at Smith, really looked at him. At the man who had stayed at her bedside for days, who had fixed her table and filled her refrigerator, who had held her daughter while she cried. She trailed off, unable to finish. Smith's phone buzzed. He glanced at it, another message from his assistant. "Tokyo deal officially cancelled. Richard Chun says they're moving forward with a different partner. You've cost the company $40 million. Board wants an emergency meeting." He powered off the phone without responding. Smith. Doris was watching him. "Is everything okay?" "Everything's fine," he said, smiling. "You just got a message. Was it important?" "Nothing's more important than being here." And he meant it. Doris tilted her head, studying him with those sharp, exhausted eyes. "What did you just give up to stay here?" "Nothing that matters." Smith. "What did you just give up?" He hesitated. Then, because lying to her felt wrong, a business deal. $40 million. "But it's fine. There will be other deals." Doris's face went pale. $40 million? It's just money. It's $40 million. And you're alive. Melissa has her mother. I'd say that's worth more than any deal. Doris stared at him like she was seeing him for the first time. "You canceled a $40 million deal," she repeated slowly, "to stay here. With us." "Yes." "Why?" Smith looked at Melissa, still coloring happily, oblivious to the weight of the conversation. Then he looked back at Doris. "Because Melissa drew a picture of her family," he said quietly. "And somehow, impossibly, I was in it." Doris's eyes filled with tears. And for the first time since he'd met her, she didn't look suspicious or defensive or scared. She looked like maybe, just maybe, she was starting to believe he wasn't going anywhere. Doris was discharged from the hospital on a Tuesday morning. Smith had arranged everything: a car service to take them home, a nurse to check in daily for the first week, prescriptions filled and delivered, a follow-up appointment with Dr. Chen scheduled for the following Monday. He'd also arranged something else. Something he was nervous about in a way he hadn't been nervous about anything in years. "I need to talk to you about something," Smith said as they stood outside Doris's apartment building. Melissa was already running up the stairs, excited to be home. Doris turned to him, immediately suspicious. "What did you do?" "Nothing yet. But I have a proposal." "Smith. Just hear me out. Please." Doris crossed her arms, her expression guarded. But she nodded. "Come to my office tomorrow," Smith said. "Bring Melissa. I want to show you something." "Show me what?" "A possibility." Doris studied him for a long moment. "This isn't another charity thing, is it?" "No," Smith said honestly. "This is a job offer." The Ramos Industries building occupied an entire city block downtown. Doris stood on the sidewalk the next afternoon, staring up at the gleaming glass tower, feeling completely out of place in her nicest outfit, a simple blue dress she'd worn to job interviews years ago, before Melissa was born, before everything fell apart. Melissa held her hand, equally awestruck. "Mr. Smith works here." "Apparently," Doris murmured. They walked through the revolving doors into a lobby that looked like something from a magazine. Marble floors. Modern art on the walls. A receptionist behind a desk that probably cost more than Doris's entire apartment. "We're here to see Smith Ramos," Doris said, feeling absurdly small. The receptionist's professional smile brightened. "Mrs. Lawson. Mr. Ramos is expecting you. Top floor." She gestured toward a private elevator. "This will take you directly to his office." The elevator ride felt like ascending into another world. When the doors opened, they stepped into a space that was all windows and light and quiet luxury. A woman in her 50s with kind eyes and perfect posture approached immediately. "Mrs. Lawson, I'm Margaret, Mr. Ramos's executive assistant. He's finishing a call, but he'll be right with you. Please, make yourselves comfortable." She led them to a seating area with leather couches and a coffee table with fresh flowers. Melissa's eyes were huge, taking in everything. "Is Mr. Smith rich?" she whispered. "Very rich, apparently," Doris whispered back, her stomach churning. Smith emerged from his office a moment later, and Doris barely recognized him. Gone was the rumpled suit and exhausted expression. He looked like he'd stepped out of a business magazine. Sharp navy suit, crisp white shirt, but the same warm smile when he saw Melissa. "There's my favorite artist," he said, kneeling down to Melissa's level. She ran to him immediately, hugging him. "Your office is so big. Want to see the view?" Smith stood, taking her hand, and led her to the floor-to-ceiling windows. "You can see the whole city from here." Doris watched them together, this billionaire and her 6-year-old daughter, pointing out landmarks like old friends, and felt something complicated twist in her chest. After a few minutes, Smith turned to Margaret. "Would you mind taking Melissa to the break room? I heard someone brought donuts today." "Donuts?" Melissa's eyes lit up. "With sprinkles," Margaret confirmed, holding out her hand. "Come on, sweetie." When they were alone, Smith gestured toward his office. "Can we talk?" Doris followed him into a space that was somehow both impressive and understated. A massive desk with multiple monitors. Bookshelves filled with business texts and, surprisingly, novels. Framed photos, his parents, she assumed, and one of himself receiving some kind of award. Smith closed the door and turned to face her. "Before you say anything," Doris started, "I need you to understand something. I appreciate everything you've done for me and Melissa. Truly. But I can't keep accepting charity. I need to work. I need to provide for my daughter myself." "I know," Smith said. "That's why you're here." He walked to his desk and picked up a folder, handing it to her. Doris opened it slowly. Inside was a job description, a contract, a benefits package. "Operations Coordinator," she read aloud. "Ramos Industries. Salary, $75,000 annually. Full health insurance, dental, vision. 4 weeks paid vacation. Sick leave. Retirement matching. She stopped reading, her hands trembling. It's a real position, Smith said quickly. Not made up for you. We've needed someone in this role for months. You'd be coordinating between departments, managing schedules, handling logistics. It's administrative work, but it's important. And it has room for advancement if you want it. Doris stared at the papers. $75,000. She currently made maybe $30,000 combined from her 3 jobs that were destroying her body, giving her no time with Melissa, slowly killing her. Why? She asked, her voice barely a whisper. Because you're smart, organized, and hardworking. Because you deserve a chance. Because you feel guilty, Doris interrupted, looking up at him with sharp eyes. Because you're trying to save me. Because I'm trying to offer you an opportunity, Smith corrected gently. There's a difference. Is there? Or are you just putting me on your payroll so you can feel better about yourself? Smith flinched. That's not fair. Isn't it? You swoop in, pay my bills, fix my apartment, and now you're offering me a job at your company? How is that not just another form of charity? It's employment. A fair wage for fair work. You'd earn every dollar, Doris. I'm not giving you anything you wouldn't deserve. And if I refuse? If I say no, what happens? Do you walk away? Do you stop helping Melissa? Do we go back to being strangers? The questions hit Smith like physical blows. No. Of course not. I'd never. Then how is this a real job offer? How is it not just charity with a different name? Smith was quiet for a long moment. When he spoke, his voice was raw. You're right. Part of me is doing this because I care about you and Melissa. Because I want to make sure you're safe and secure. But that doesn't make the job any less real. We genuinely need someone in this role. You genuinely have the skills for it. And I genuinely believe you'd be excellent at it. I have a high school diploma and 3 minimum wage jobs on my resume. You have 6 years of running a household alone, managing multiple work schedules, budgeting on nothing, and keeping a child healthy and happy through impossible circumstances. That's more impressive than any business degree. Doris's eyes filled with tears. She looked back down at the contract, at the salary, at the benefits, at the life she'd never dreamed possible. I can't, she whispered. Smith's face fell. Why not? Because if I take this, I'll owe you everything. My job, my security, my daughter's future. It'll all be because of you. And what happens when you get bored? What happens when helping me stops being interesting? What happens when... Mom. They both turned. Melissa stood in the doorway, Margaret hovering apologetically behind her. Sorry, Margaret said. She heard voices and wanted to check on you. It's okay, Smith said. Melissa walked over to her mother, chocolate from a donut still on her face. Mom, why are you crying? I'm not crying, baby girl. You look like you're gonna cry. Melissa looked between them, sensing the tension. Are you fighting again? No, honey. We're just talking about grown-up things. Is Mr. Smith leaving? No. Are we leaving? No, Melissa. Then why do you look scared? Melissa's voice got smaller. I don't want to leave Mr. Smith. I like him. He's nice to us. Doris closed her eyes, fighting back tears. Melissa, she said softly, Mr. Smith offered me a job. A really good job. But I don't know if I should take it. Why not? Because it's complicated. Does the job pay money? Yes. Would you have to work 3 jobs anymore? No. Just this one. Would you be home more? Doris's breath caught. Yes. I would. Melissa looked at her mother with those wise, too old eyes. Then why wouldn't you take it, Mom? I want you home more. I want you to not be so tired all the time. Her voice cracked. I want you to not almost die again. The words shattered something inside Doris. She sank to her knees and pulled Melissa into her arms, holding her tight. I'm scared, baby, she admitted. I'm scared of needing help. I'm scared of depending on someone who might leave. Mr. Smith won't leave, Melissa said with absolute certainty. He promised. And he keeps his promises. Doris looked up at Smith over her daughter's head. He was watching them with such raw emotion on his face that it took her breath away. Please, Mom, Melissa whispered. Please say yes. I want you to rest. I want you to be happy. Doris held her daughter, felt the weight of 6 years of struggle and fear and exhaustion pressing down on her. Felt the possibility of something different, something better, just within reach. Finally, she stood. Looked at Smith. Looked at the contract still clutched in her hand. If I take this, she said quietly, I need you to promise me something. Anything. Promise me you'll treat me like a real employee. Not a charity case. If I mess up, tell me. If I'm not meeting expectations, fire me. Don't keep me around because you feel sorry for me. I promise, Smith said immediately. And promise me that if you ever decide you're done, with this job with us, with whatever this is, you'll tell me honestly. Don't just disappear. Smith stepped closer. Doris, I'm not going anywhere. But yes. I promise. Doris took a shaky breath. Then, before she could change her mind. Okay. I accept. Melissa squealed and hugged her mother's legs. Smith's face broke into the widest smile Doris had ever seen on him. You won't regret this, he said. I hope not. The first week was surreal. Doris showed up to work in her best clothes, which Smith's assistant Margaret gently helped her supplement with a few new pieces from the company wardrobe budget for new hires. The work itself was challenging but manageable. Coordinating schedules, organizing meetings, managing communications between departments. Doris threw herself into it with the same fierce dedication she'd given to her other jobs. But this time, she left at 5 o'clock. This time, she had lunch breaks. This time, when she got home, Melissa was thrilled to see her instead of already asleep. Smith brought her lunch on Thursday, claiming he was just picking something up anyway. They ate together in his office, talking about work and Melissa and nothing important. His employees noticed the change in him. Mr. Ramos smiled at me today, one junior analyst told another in the break room. Actually smiled. Is he feeling okay? He held the elevator for someone yesterday, another added. The old Smith would have let the doors close. Margaret noticed too. She pulled Doris aside on Friday afternoon. Whatever you and your daughter are doing for him, she said warmly, thank you. I've worked for Smith for 10 years. I've never seen him this human. Doris didn't know what to say to that. On Monday of the second week, Melissa came to visit after school. Smith had arranged for a car service to pick her up, just until you get settled, he'd said. Melissa burst into the office like she owned the place, ran straight to Smith, and climbed into his lap while he was on a conference call. Smith didn't miss a beat. He just shifted her weight, kept talking about quarterly projections, and let her draw on his notepad. His board members on the video call looked stunned. After work, Smith walked them to the elevator. Same time tomorrow, he asked Doris. I work for you, she said, smiling slightly. You tell me what time. Fair point. He grinned. But I meant dinner. Tomorrow night. My place. Let me cook for you both. Doris hesitated. Smith. As friends, he added quickly. Just friends. If that's okay. Before Doris could answer, Melissa grabbed his hand. We'll be there, she announced. Smith laughed. Doris sighed. Fine. But I'm bringing dessert. Deal. They were walking toward the car when Doris's phone buzzed. A text from one of her old co-workers at the diner. Girl, did you see this? Below was a link to a business article. Doris clicked it, curiosity getting the better of her. The headline made her stop walking. Billionaire CEO Smith Ramos cancels major deal. Sources say personal reasons. Below was a photo of Smith at some charity gala. The caption read, Smith Ramos, CEO of Ramos Industries, net worth estimated at $2.3 billion. Doris's blood went cold. 2.3 billion. With AB. She'd known he was wealthy. But this? Mom. Melissa tugged her hand. Are you okay? Doris couldn't form words. She turned and looked back at the building, at the tower with Smith's name literally on it, at the empire he'd built, at the world he commanded. And he'd offered her a $75,000 job like it was the most natural thing in the world. He'd paid her hospital bills like they were pocket change. He'd canceled a $40 million deal to stay with them. Because to him, 40 million was. Oh my God, Doris whispered. She'd been worried about owing him. About depending on him. About him getting bored. But she'd been worried about the wrong things entirely. Smith Ramos wasn't just rich. He was one of the most powerful men in the country. And she'd been treating him like a normal person who happened to have money. Doris's hands shook as she stared at the article. Tomorrow, they were supposed to have dinner at his place. Tomorrow, she was going to confront him about exactly who he was. And exactly what he wanted from her. Doris didn't sleep that night. She lay in her bed, the new bed frame Smith had delivered, with a new mattress that didn't have springs poking through, and stared at the ceiling, her phone clutched in her hand. $2.3 billion. She'd read the article 17 times. Had Googled him. Had found photos of him at charity galas with celebrities, at business conferences with world leaders, at ribbon-cutting ceremonies for buildings he owned. Smith Ramos wasn't just wealthy. He was powerful. The kind of powerful that moved markets, influenced politicians, changed lives with a phone call. And she'd argued with him about paying her hospital bills. She'd accused him of meddling. She'd treated him like a normal person. Doris felt sick. Because now she understood. This wasn't about charity or guilt or even kindness. This was a billionaire playing with people's lives because he could. Because it was interesting. Because... No. That wasn't fair. But was it true? By the time dawn broke, Doris had made a decision. She needed answers. Real answers. Not the careful, gentle responses Smith had been giving her. She needed to know what he actually wanted from her. She texted him at 6 a.m., "We need to talk." Before dinner. Before anything else. His response came immediately, "My place." 10 a.m. "I'll send a car." "No car. I'll take the bus." "Send me the address." A pause. Then, "Okay." Smith's penthouse occupied the entire top floor of a luxury building in the financial district. Doris stood in the lobby, all gleaming marble and doormen in uniforms, feeling like an imposter. The doorman had looked at her worn jeans and old jacket with barely concealed skepticism until she'd given Smith's name. Then his expression had shifted to professional courtesy. "Mr. Ramos is expecting you, ma'am. Penthouse level. The elevator requires a key card." He handed her one. "Just for today." Just for today. Like she'd need it again. Like she belonged here. The elevator ride was silent except for the soft classical music playing overhead. Doris watched the numbers climb, 30, 40, 50, higher than she'd ever been in a building. The doors opened directly into Smith's apartment. Not a hallway. Not a landing. The elevator opened into his home. Doris stepped out onto hardwood floors that probably cost more than her yearly salary. Floor-to-ceiling windows showed the entire city spread out like a toy model. Modern furniture that belonged in museums. Art on the walls that might actually be from museums. This was Smith's real world. And she didn't belong in it. Smith appeared from what looked like a kitchen, because of course his kitchen was the size of her entire apartment. He was in casual clothes, jeans and a simple gray t-shirt, but even dressed down, he looked expensive. Like he'd been born to occupy spaces like this. "Doris." He smiled, but it faded when he saw her expression. "What's wrong?" $2.3 billion, Doris said without preamble. Smith went very still. You saw the article. Why didn't you tell me? Would it have changed anything? Yes. It changes everything. Doris's voice rose despite her intention to stay calm. I thought you were just, I don't know, successful, comfortable, not one of the richest men in the country. Does it matter? Of course it matters. Don't you see? I've been treating you like a normal person with money. Like someone who could maybe, possibly understand what my life is like. But you can't. You can't possibly understand. Smith flinched. That's not fair. Isn't it? When was the last time you worried about rent? About whether you could afford groceries? About whether one missed paycheck would mean homelessness? Doris was shaking now, all the fear and confusion and anger from the sleepless night pouring out. You canceled a $40 million deal and called it nothing important. Do you have any idea how much money that is to someone like me? That's more than I'll make in my entire lifetime. And you just walked away from it. Because being with you and Melissa was more important. Why? Doris interrupted, her voice breaking. Why is being with us more important? What do you want from me, Smith? What do you really want? The question hung in the air between them. Smith's face crumbled. You think I have ulterior motives. I think men like you don't do things without a reason. Men like me. Smith's voice was hollow. You mean rich men. Powerful men. Men who can't possibly just want to help because it's the right thing to do. Yes, Doris said, even though the word tasted bitter. Men who are used to getting what they want. Who see people like me as projects. Or entertainment. Or... Stop. Smith's voice was sharp now, cutting. Just stop. He walked to the windows, his back to her, his shoulders rigid. You want to know why I'm helping you, he said quietly. You want to know what I want? Yes. Smith turned to face her, and Doris was shocked to see tears in his eyes. I want to feel human again, he said, his voice raw. I want to matter to someone beyond what I can provide for them. I want to wake up and have a reason to be alive that isn't just accumulating more wealth or closing more deals or being more successful. Doris stared at him, speechless. You think being rich solves everything? Smith continued, his words tumbling out now like a dam breaking. You think having money means you're happy? I have everything, Doris. Everything except the things that actually matter. I have a penthouse I barely sleep in. An office I spend 90 hours a week in. A company that needs me but doesn't know me. And before I met you and Melissa, I had exactly 0 people in my life who gave a damn about me as a person rather than as a bank account or a business opportunity. Smith. Melissa ran to me in that airport, he said, his voice breaking. A little girl I'd never met, scared out of her mind, and she looked at me like I could save her. Not because I was rich. Not because I was powerful. Because I was there. Because she needed help and I was human enough to provide it. And when I looked into her eyes, something in me changed. Something I didn't even know was broken started to heal. Tears were streaming down his face now. I didn't help you because I'm rich, Smith said. I helped because I'm human. Or because I wanted to remember how to be human. Because for the first time in years, maybe decades, someone needed me for reasons that had nothing to do with money. Doris felt her own tears spilling over. You scared me, she whispered. I know. Not because you're rich. Because I started to need you. And needing people is how you get hurt. Smith stepped closer, slowly, like approaching a wounded animal. Tell me about it. Tell me what you're afraid of. Doris wiped her eyes roughly. I'm afraid of falling for someone who could leave any moment. I'm afraid of letting Melissa get attached to someone who might decide we're not interesting anymore. I'm afraid that one day you'll wake up and realize that your real life, the penthouses and the galas and the billion-dollar deals, is more important than 2 broken people living in a tiny apartment. You're not broken. Yes, I am, Doris said, her voice cracking. I'm a single mother with kidney disease and 3 jobs, 1 job now, and a daughter who's already lost too much. I'm drowning in bills and bad choices and the weight of just trying to survive. What could you possibly want with someone like me?" "Everything," Smith said simply. The word landed like a physical blow. "What?" "I want everything with you," Smith said, his voice steady now despite the tears. "I want Tuesday morning breakfasts and arguments about letting me help. I want Melissa's drawings on my walls and her climbing into my lap during conference calls. I want to come home to people who are happy to see me, not because of what I can do for them, but because they like who I am. I want to matter to someone. I want to be chosen by someone who has every reason to walk away but stays anyway." Smith. "I'm alone, Doris," he said, his voice breaking again. "I've been alone for years. Surrounded by people, but completely alone. My parents are gone. I have no siblings. My relationships have all been with people who wanted my money or my influence or my name. Nobody's ever just wanted me. Until now. Until you and Melissa looked at me like I was worth something beyond my bank account." Doris couldn't breathe. "We're not a solution to your loneliness." "I know. But maybe you could be my family." The word family hit Doris like a wave. "I can't be responsible for fixing you," she said, but her voice was weaker now. "I'm not asking you to fix me. I'm asking you to let me stand beside you while we both figure out how to be less broken together." "That's not fair," Doris whispered. "That's not fair to say things like that." "Why not?" "Because it makes me want to believe you." "Then believe me." Smith took another step closer. "I know I'm too rich. I know I'm from a different world. I know every logical reason why this doesn't make sense. But Doris, when was the last time you let yourself want something just because it made you happy? Not because it was practical or safe or logical, but because it made you feel alive." Doris thought about the past 6 years. The endless work. The sacrifices. The nights crying into her pillow after Melissa fell asleep. The slow erosion of every dream she'd ever had until survival was the only goal left. "I can't remember," she admitted. "Me neither," Smith said. "Until I met you." They stood there in his ridiculous penthouse with its $1,000,000 view, both of them crying, both of them terrified, both of them damaged in different ways by different kinds of poverty, hers material, his emotional. "I'm scared," Doris said. "Me too. What if this doesn't work? What if it does?" Doris laughed, a broken, watery sound. "You're insufferably optimistic. You're impossibly stubborn. We're a disaster. Maybe we're a perfect disaster." Doris shook her head, but she was smiling now through her tears. "You can't just throw money at this and make it work." "I know. That's why I'm terrified. Money is the one thing I know how to use. Without it, I'm just a man hoping someone will choose to stay." Smith. The elevator dinged. They both turned. The doors opened and Melissa burst out, Margaret following apologetically behind her. "I'm so sorry," Margaret said. "She begged to see you, and after the conference call, I thought." "It's okay," Smith said, wiping his eyes quickly. But Melissa had already seen. She ran to her mother first. "Mommy, why are you crying? Is something wrong?" "No, baby girl. Everything's okay." "Then why is Mr. Smith crying too?" Doris looked at Smith helplessly. Melissa looked between them, her small face serious. Then she reached into her backpack and pulled out a piece of paper, another drawing. This one showed 3 stick figures holding hands. But this time, they were standing in front of a house with a heart drawn above it. "I made this in school today," Melissa said quietly. "Mrs. Chun helped me with the words." She pointed to the bottom of the page where, in careful letters, someone had helped her write, "My family." "That's you, Mommy," Melissa said, pointing to the first figure. "And that's me. And that's Mr. Smith. Because you said family is people who love you and take care of you and stay even when things are hard." She looked up at both of them with those 2 wise eyes. "Are we a family now?" she asked. The question hung in the air. Doris looked at Smith. He was staring at her with such raw hope and fear that it made her chest ache. Everything in her logical brain screamed that this was crazy. That you couldn't build a family with a billionaire you'd known for 2 weeks. That this was a fairy tale that would end badly. That she was setting herself and Melissa up for devastating heartbreak. But when she looked at Melissa, at her daughter who had been through so much, who had almost lost her mother, who had found someone she trusted and loved, Doris couldn't say no. She couldn't take this away from her daughter. And maybe, just maybe, she didn't want to take it away from herself either. I don't know, Doris said finally, honestly, looking at Smith. I don't know what we are. But I know I'm willing to find out. Smith's face transformed, hope blooming like sunrise. That's enough, he said softly. That's more than enough. Melissa squealed and threw her arms around both of them, pulling them into a hug. And standing there in Smith's penthouse, her in her worn jeans, him in his expensive casual wear, Melissa between them holding her drawing, Doris felt something shift. Not fixed. Not solved. Not perfect. But possible. For the first time in longer than she could remember, the future felt possible. 3 weeks later, everything had changed. And nothing had changed. Doris still lived in her small apartment with a fixed table and the full refrigerator. She still went to work every day, though now it was to an office where people respected her, where her opinions mattered, where she had health insurance and a future. Melissa still drew pictures and asked endless questions and lit up every room she entered. Smith still worked too much and worried too much and carried the weight of his empire on his shoulders. But now, at the end of every day, there was somewhere he wanted to be. Someone he wanted to see. A reason to leave the office that had nothing to do with exhaustion and everything to do with hope. Tonight, he'd shown up at Doris's apartment at 7 with grocery bags and a smile. I thought I'd cook, he'd said, almost shy. If that's okay. Doris had stepped aside to let him in, and Melissa had launched herself at him like she always did, like he was a safe harbor she could always count on. Now, dinner was finished. Melissa had told them elaborate stories about school, about her new friend Emma, about the butterfly she'd seen at recess. She'd eaten every bite of the pasta Smith had made, carbonara, because she'd mentioned once that she liked noodles with cheese, and had fallen asleep during the movie they'd put on afterward. Smith had carried her to bed without being asked, had tucked her in gently, had whispered good night to her sleeping form. And now he was in Doris's tiny kitchen, drying dishes while she washed, their shoulders almost touching in the cramped space. The silence between them wasn't uncomfortable. It rarely was anymore. But it was charged, full of all the things they hadn't said, hadn't done, hadn't allowed themselves to want. You don't have to help with dishes, Doris said softly, handing him another plate. I know. Smith dried it carefully, his movements precise even in something as mundane as housework. But I want to. You always want to help. Is that a bad thing? No, Doris admitted. It's just different. I'm not used to it. Smith set the plate down and turned to face her. They were close, too close in the small kitchen. Close enough that Doris could see the flecks of gold in his brown eyes. Close enough to feel the warmth radiating from him. Doris, he said quietly, can I tell you something? Her heart started beating faster. Okay. I don't want to walk out of your life. The words were simple, but they landed like an earthquake. Smith. Not today. Not ever, he continued, his voice steady but intense. I know we've been taking things slowly. I know you need time to trust this. Trust me. But I need you to know that I'm not going anywhere. This isn't temporary for me. You and Melissa, you're not some phase I'm going through. You're the best thing that's ever happened to me. Doris's eyes filled with tears. You can't say things like that. Why not? Because it makes me want to believe you. Then believe me. Smith reached up slowly, giving her time to pull away, and cupped her face gently with one hand. Believe that I love being here. Believe that I love drying your dishes and listening to Melissa's stories and eating pasta at a wobbly table in a kitchen the size of my closet. Believe that this is the only place I want to be at the end of every day. A tear slid down Doris's cheek. Smith caught it with his thumb. I'm scared, she whispered. Of what? Of how much I'm starting to need you. Good, Smith said, his voice rough. Because I already need you. And I'm terrified. But I'd rather be terrified with you than safe and alone. Doris looked up at him, this man who had crashed into her life like lightning, who had saved her daughter and paid her bills and offered her a future she'd never dreamed possible. This man who stood in her kitchen drying dishes like it was the most important thing in the world. I don't want you to leave either, she admitted, her voice barely audible. Smith's breath caught. Say that again. I don't want you to leave. I want, her voice broke. I want you to stay. Not just tonight. Not just for Melissa. For me too. I want you to stay for me. Something in Smith's expression cracked open, raw emotion flooding through. Doris, he breathed. And then they were kissing. Smith's hand slid from her face to the back of her neck, pulling her closer. Doris's wet hands found his shirt, gripping the fabric like an anchor. The kiss was slow and deep and trembling, full of weeks of tension, of fear, of two people finally admitting what they'd been afraid to want. Smith kissed her like she was precious. Like she was the answer to a question he'd been asking his whole life. Doris kissed him like she was falling, and trusting him to catch her. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, Smith rested his forehead against hers. I'm in love with you, he whispered. I know it's too soon. I know it's crazy. But I'm in love with you, Doris. I have been since the moment you looked at me in that hospital room and refused to trust me. I fell in love with your strength and your pride and the way you fight for your daughter and yourself. I fell in love with you. Doris was crying fully now, tears streaming down her face. Smith. You don't have to say it back, he said quickly. I'm not asking for anything. I just needed you to know. I love you too, Doris said, the words tumbling out before she could stop them. God help me, I love you too. And it terrifies me. Smith laughed, a sound of pure joy and relief. He pulled her close, holding her tight against his chest, and Doris wrapped her arms around him and let herself be held. Neither of them saw the small figure in the hallway. Melissa stood there in her pajamas, having woken up thirsty and wandered out for water. She watched her mother and Mr. Smith holding each other in the kitchen, saw them kiss gently one more time, saw the way they looked at each other like nothing else in the world existed. She smiled, the biggest, brightest smile, and tiptoed quietly back to her room. Tomorrow she'd tell them she knew. Tomorrow she'd draw a new picture with hearts around all three of them. But tonight, she'd let them have their moment. Because this was what family looked like. Smith didn't leave after the kiss. They stood in the kitchen talking, really talking, about everything and nothing. About Smith's loneliness before them. About Doris's fear of depending on someone. About Melissa and the future and what it meant to build something together. Eventually they moved to the living room, sitting close on the new couch Smith had delivered, Doris tucked under his arm like she belonged there. Stay, Doris said sometime after midnight. Smith pulled back to look at her. What? Stay tonight. Not like that, she added quickly, blushing. But stay. Sleep on the couch. Be here in the morning, when Melissa wakes up. I want her to see that you meant it. That you're not leaving. Smith's eyes were suspiciously bright. Are you sure? I'm sure. So Smith stayed. Doris found him a blanket and a pillow. They said good night at her bedroom door, another kiss, softer this time, full of promise rather than desperation. But before Doris could close her door, she heard a small voice. Mr. Smith. They both turned. Melissa stood in her doorway, rubbing her eyes. Hey, sweetheart, Smith said, walking over to her. What are you doing awake? I had a dream, Melissa said. Then she looked at her mother. Is Mr. Smith staying? Doris nodded. He's staying tonight. Is he staying forever? The question, so innocent, so direct, made both adults freeze. Smith knelt down to Melissa's level. Do you want me to stay forever? Yes, Melissa said immediately. I want us to be a real family. Like in my drawings. Smith looked up at Doris, a question in his eyes. Doris walked over and knelt beside him. Melissa, honey, families are complicated. But yes, Mr. Smith is staying. For as long as he wants to be here. Forever, Smith said firmly, looking at Melissa. I'm staying forever. If that's okay with you and your mom. Melissa threw her arms around his neck. It's okay with me. Smith held her, his eyes closed, his throat tight with emotion. When Melissa pulled back, he kissed her forehead gently. Good night, kiddo. Sweet dreams. Good night, Mr. Smith. Smith, he corrected softly. Just Smith. Or. He glanced at Doris. Whatever you want to call me. Melissa thought for a moment. Then, with the seriousness only a 6-year-old could manage, can I call you Dad? The world stopped. Smith couldn't breathe. Couldn't think. Could only stare at this little girl who had run to him in an airport and grabbed onto him like he was salvation itself. You want to call me Dad, he managed. My other dad left, Melissa said matter-of-factly. But you stayed. You're nice to Mommy. You read me stories. You fix things. That's what dads do, right? Smith looked at Doris, panic and hope warring on his face. Doris was crying again. She nodded. If that's what you both want. Smith turned back to Melissa and pulled her into another hug, this one tighter longer. Yes, he whispered into her curls. Yes, you can call me Dad. Melissa squeezed him hard. Okay, Dad. Good night. Good night, sweetheart. Doris tucked Melissa back into bed, kissing her forehead and whispering something Smith couldn't hear. When she came back out, she found Smith still kneeling in the hallway, his face in his hands, shoulders shaking. She knelt beside him. Smith. She called me Dad, he said, his voice breaking. She wants to call me Dad. Is that okay? It's everything, Smith said, looking up at her with tears streaming down his face. It's everything I never knew I wanted. I don't deserve it. I don't deserve either of you. Yes, you do, Doris said firmly, taking his face in her hands. You saved us. Both of us. And now we get to save you back. Smith kissed her, desperate and grateful and full of love. When they finally pulled apart, Doris helped him to his feet. Get some sleep, she said softly. We have our whole lives to figure this out. Our whole lives, Smith repeated, like he was testing the words. I like the sound of that. They said goodnight again. Smith settled on the couch, staring at the ceiling, his heart too full to sleep. He had everything now. Everything that mattered. A woman who loved him for who he was, not what he had. A daughter, his daughter now, in all the ways that mattered, who trusted him completely. A family built not on blood or obligation, but on choice and compassion and fate. Smith closed his eyes and smiled. For the first time in his life, he was home. Smith's phone buzzed at 2 a.m. He'd finally fallen asleep on the couch, exhausted and happy and more at peace than he'd been in years. The buzzing was insistent. Urgent. He grabbed the phone, silencing it quickly so it wouldn't wake Doris or Melissa. 15 missed calls. All from board members. All marked urgent. Then a text from his CFO, call me immediately. Emergency board meeting scheduled for 8 a.m. tomorrow. They're making a move. Smith sat up, his heart sinking. He dialed. His CFO answered on the first ring. Smith, thank God. We have a problem. What kind of problem? The board is calling for a vote. They want you removed as CEO. Smith's blood went cold. On what grounds? They're saying you've become distracted. Unreliable. They're pointing to the Tokyo deal, the cancelled meetings, your personal situation. My personal situation, Smith repeated flatly. There's been talk. About your relationship with an employee. About you getting involved with, his CFO paused, clearly uncomfortable. With people from different social circumstances. They're saying it's affecting your judgment. They're saying I shouldn't be with Doris because she's poor, Smith translated bluntly. Smith. That's what they mean. Say it plainly. A pause. Yes. That's what they mean. They think you're having some kind of breakdown. That you've lost perspective. That you're making emotional decisions that are hurting the company. Smith closed his eyes. And the vote. Tomorrow morning. 8 a.m. If the board removes you, you lose control of the company. You'd still be the largest shareholder, but you'd have no operational power. No authority. They'd install someone else as CEO. The company I built from nothing, Smith said quietly. Yes. Smith looked around the small apartment. At the couch where he'd just had the best night's sleep in years. At the hallway leading to 2 bedrooms, one where the woman he loved was sleeping, one where his daughter was dreaming. What do I need to do? He asked. Show up. Fight for your position. Remind them who built this company. Make it clear that your personal life doesn't affect your professional capabilities. And, another pause. And you might need to distance yourself from Mrs. Lawson. Publicly. Just for now. Just until things settle down. Distance myself, Smith repeated. I know it's not ideal. No, Smith. No, Smith said firmly. I'm not distancing myself from Doris. I'm not choosing my company over my family. Your family? Smith, you've known her for less than a month. She's my family, Smith said. She and Melissa. They're my family. And I don't walk away from family. Then you're going to lose your company. Then I lose it. Smith, you're not thinking clearly. This is your life's work. Everything you've built. You can't just throw it away for what? Smith interrupted coldly. For a woman and child who have given me more happiness in 3 weeks than that company has given me in 20 years? For people who love me for who I am rather than what I can do for them? For a family that actually wants me around? You're making a mistake. Maybe. But it's my mistake to make. Smith hung up. He sat in the darkness of Doris's living room, his phone in his hand, his entire empire hanging in the balance. Behind him, a door opened quietly. Doris stood in her doorway, wrapped in an old robe, her eyes concerned. Smith? I heard voices. Is everything okay? Smith looked at her, this woman who worked so hard, who loved so fiercely, who had let him into her life despite every reason not to. There's a board meeting tomorrow, he said quietly. They want to remove me as CEO. Doris's face went pale. Because of me. Because of their prejudice and narrow-mindedness. Not because of you. Smith, you can't lose your company because of us. I'm not losing it because of you, Smith said, standing and walking to her. If I lose it, it's because I chose something more important than money and power. I chose love. I chose family. I chose a life that actually matters. But Smith pulled her into his arms. Doris, I could have everything in the world and still be empty. Or I could have you and Melissa and be the richest man alive. There's no choice. There was never a choice. Doris held him tight, and they stood there in the darkness, building a family that the world would try to tear apart. But they'd face it together. Whatever came next, they'd face it together.
And that, my beautiful family, is how a billionaire who never missed a flight missed the one thing that mattered most, being human. Smith Ramos built an empire of precision and power, a man who measured life in millions and moments lost to ambition. But it took one terrified child in a red dress, a little girl named Melissa, to show him that real wealth isn't found in boardrooms or bank accounts, but in the courage to stop, kneel down, and say, I'm here. Doris worked 3 jobs and still chose dignity. Smith had billions and finally chose love. And together, with Melissa holding their hands, they built a family not from blood or money, but from the simple, powerful truth that compassion changes everything, even when it costs you the world. So if you've ever felt broken, overlooked, or too poor to matter, remember this. Your worth isn't measured by what you have, but by how fiercely you love through the struggle. Someone somewhere is hoping for a helper. Be the one who stops running. If this story touched your heart, click subscribe, type "I believe" in the comments, and tell me where you're watching from. Because stories like this, stories of second chances, chosen families, and love that defies every rule, remind us that even after collapse, we can rise again. Together.